industries and the practices that have caused this issue are being treated as essential, and the workers treated as essential workers. And what that means is that they're kind of being treated like disposable entities. And we know that living near these places and working on these places means that you are going to be disproportionately affected, not only by COVID-19, but other disease issues and health issues.
We see a wide variety of illnesses in patients who live and work around factory farms. One of the things that we notice with factory farms is a decrease in air quality around them, and it's due to a few factors. One of them is the risk of aerosolized endotoxins. Another one is the chemicals that we're seeing, so the pesticides, but also chemicals like ammonia from the excrement and things like that. And finally, we know there's a larger proportion of things like gram-negative bacteria or fecal bacteria that are known to cause illness in humans. One of my colleagues had a patient who had a multi-drug resistant urinary tract infection, incredibly rare resistance pattern. No real reason for this patient in particular to have this type of infection, no risk factors. Her only risk factor was when you Googled her address, she lived within a mile of a factory farm.
I'm not a doctor, I'm not a scientist, but I can tell you this, as I'm flying over those factory farms, and I can smell, sometimes I can smell that hog waste at 2,000 feet in the air, my common sense tells me that this is a health risk, a health hazard. Pigs in eastern North Carolina are producing more fecal waste each and every day as is produced by all the people in the states of North Carolina, California, New York, Texas, New Hampshire, and North Dakota. And they're putting it in these huge ponds, these cesspools that they call lagoons, and when they fill up, they simply dump it on the ground under the pretext of growing crops. It runs into our rivers, fish begin to die, the people get sick. It's no secret why these farms, they're not farms, why these factories are here. It's money. It's big money. And it's coming at the expense of the people who live nearby.
The people who work in factory farms, the people who live near factory farms are far more likely to be low-income people of color. This is in part because the industries have a tendency to preferentially place their farms in these communities of disenfranchised populations.
We are being denied clean air, clean water, and they don't even seem to care. Majority of all these dirty industries, CAFOs, whatever, landfills, they're all located in communities of color, Latino and Native American communities. That's where they are. But the owners are not black, they're not Latino, they're not Native American. So why aren't they in their neighborhoods?
We feel like it's intentional that they cite themselves in these communities, and we call it environmental racism. Putting stuff in some place that you wouldn't put in your own community. You know, you don't want it near you, so you just put it over here and you put it on people, you know, that you think can't fight back.
Every house along this street, you can count at least one person in the household that had cancer. A couple of days I started to go outside to play with my dogs and it smelled so bad I just didn't even try to go outside and play. I don't think it's people of color just being overlooked here. I think they're overlooked everywhere. They are least likely to be represented in any elected position. And if they eventually do get someone elected in a position, there usually aren't enough of those voices to actually make a change.
This thing is a constant war on black and brown people in these communities, and we deserve to live free from this type of constant aggression. You start to see a trend of the same health problems. You start to see respiratory issues. You know, you start to see high blood pressure in children. When I think of my children, I think that's why I fight so hard, because I do want my children to live in a world where they don't have to think about environmental injustices. People are dying from things that don't have to be just so somebody can make a profit.
Yeah, we got to stay positive. Evilness, fear, and those kinds of things that do nothing but destroy you. And we're going to get it done. We've lost some great people that have been working on this along the way, but God doesn't intend for everybody to see the end product.
When it comes to factory farming, we know we've got all of these issues, antimicrobial resistance, infectious disease, racial injustice. With all of this coming from factory farms, does that mean that the solution is switching to free-range and cage-free and small-scale farms?
In my experience of smaller farms, they're not really what I think people like to imagine when they say, oh, I only buy from a small family farm. Probably some of the worst concoctions of disease I've ever seen have been on small farms because they don't have the income to afford comprehensive diagnostic testing, perhaps preventative healthcare. You know, part of the reason why African swine fever has ripped through China in the way that it has is because there were so many backyard farmers. So in terms of disease surveillance and knowing what's going on within an animal population, it's almost impossible to regulate huge numbers of small farms. And it's also just deeply impractical. You know, if people do want free-range meat, we'd have to have about 12 planets. Clearing land for livestock grazing and feed cropping is the #1 driver of deforestation worldwide. Feeding the current demand for animal products with many smaller farms would increase that land use.